a Navy SEAL saw little twins crying at his wife's grave, and when he realized why, he dropped to his knees in tears. He thought he knew the woman he loved. He thought the war was over. But nothing could prepare him for what those girls revealed about a secret promise, a dying mother, and a buried past his wife never told him. What began as a visit to say goodbye turns into a fight for two innocent lives, and the truth no one wants exposed. What did his wife hide? And can he protect what's left of her heart before it's too late? Before we dive into today's story, I'd love to know where you are watching from. Seeing your comments really reminds me why I do this every day. Montana sun cast long shadows across the tarmac as Garrett Mitchell stepped off the military transport plane. His weathered hands clutched the straps of his deployment bag, knuckles white with tension. Something was wrong. He could feel it in the pit of his stomach as he spotted Captain Reynolds waiting for him instead of Rebecca's familiar face. The captain's expression told him everything before a single word was spoken. Garrett's world tilted sideways as Reynolds delivered the news in gentle, measured tones. Rebecca, heart condition, sudden, gone. The words echoed hollowly in his ears as his training kicked in. Stand straight, breathe steady, maintain control. But inside, his heart was shattering into a million pieces. When? His voice came out rough, barely above a whisper. 3 weeks ago, Commander. We tried to reach you, but your unit was in a communications blackout zone. 3 weeks. He had been leading missions, giving orders, eating meals, living, while Rebecca lay cold in the ground. The guilt hit him like a physical blow, nearly driving him to his knees. The drive home to their ranch was a blur. Every mile marker brought fresh pain as memories flooded back. Rebecca's laugh as they picked out the property, her determined expression as she learned to mend fences, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about their future together. The house stood silent and dark against the Montana landscape. Garrett's hands shook as he inserted the key into the lock. The door swung open to reveal Rebecca's touches everywhere, her favorite throw blanket draped over the couch, her collection of photography books neatly arranged on the coffee table, her coffee mug still sitting by the kitchen sink where she must have left it that final morning. He moved through the rooms like a ghost, unable to process that she would never again fill these spaces with her warmth and light. In their bedroom, her pillow still held the indent of her head. Without conscious thought, Garrett sank down onto the bed and buried his face in it, desperately seeking any lingering trace of her scent. The funeral was held 2 days later. Garrett stood rigid in his dress blues as what felt like the entire town filed past to pay their respects. His SEAL teammates had flown in, forming a protective circle around him, but their presence only highlighted Rebecca's absence. She should have been here. Squeezing his hand and charming everyone with her bright smile. She was so proud of you, son, Rebecca's father said, his own grief evident in his trembling voice. She understood the sacrifices you both made for your country. Garrett nodded mechanically, but the words twisted like a knife in his chest. What good were those sacrifices now? He had failed in the most fundamental duty, being there when his wife needed him most. The days after the funeral passed in a fog of isolation. His team tried to stay, but Garrett sent them away. He couldn't bear their concerned looks, their careful attempts to draw him out. The ranch became his fortress of solitude, its remote location perfectly suited to his desire to shut out the world. He fell into a punishing routine, running the fence lines until his legs gave out, chopping wood until his arms trembled with exhaustion, anything to keep the crushing weight of grief at bay. But in the quiet moments when darkness fell and the house grew still, Rebecca's absence became a living thing that threatened to suffocate him. One evening, as storm clouds gathered over the mountains, Garrett found himself in Rebecca's small home office. Her calendar still hung on the wall, appointments and plans written in her neat handwriting stretching into a future she would never see. A half-finished shopping list sat on her desk. Paint for guest room, garden seeds, surprise for G. His control finally broke. With a raw cry of anguish, Garrett sank to his knees, his broad shoulders shaking with sobs. "I'm sorry," he whispered brokenly. "I'm so sorry I wasn't here. I should have been here." The storm broke outside, rain lashing against the windows as if nature itself shared his grief. Lightning illuminated the room in harsh bursts, throwing shadows across the walls. In that moment, surrounded by the remnants of the life they had built together, Garrett Mitchell, decorated Navy SEAL commander, trained warrior, had never felt more alone or more lost. Hours passed as he sat there on the floor of Rebecca's office, his back against her desk, staring unseeing into the darkness. The disciplined part of his mind told him to get up, to keep moving forward as his training had taught him. But for the first time in his life, he couldn't find the strength to follow that inner command. The rain eventually tapered off, leaving behind a heavy silence, broken only by the steady drip of water from the eaves. Garrett remained motionless, his thoughts circling endlessly around one devastating truth. He had spent his life protecting others, serving his country, completing the mission at all costs. But when it mattered most, he hadn't been there to protect the one person who meant everything to him. As dawn began to paint the sky in pale streaks, Garrett finally stirred. His body protested as he pushed himself to his feet, stiff from hours spent on the hard floor. He moved to the window, watching as the sun slowly illuminated the familiar landscape of their ranch. Rebecca had loved this view, had often said it made her feel close to heaven. Now she was truly there, and he was left behind. A soldier without a mission, a husband without a wife, a man drowning in the depths of his own grief and guilt. The morning light touched the mountains with gold, but for Garrett Mitchell, the world remained shrouded in shadows, every day stretching ahead like an endless deployment in a war he didn't know how to fight. The Montana morning dawned crisp and clear as Garrett Mitchell gripped the steering wheel of his truck, forcing himself to drive the familiar route into town. 3 weeks had passed since the funeral, and he hadn't been able to bring himself to visit Rebecca's grave. But today, on what would have been their 5th wedding anniversary, he couldn't stay away any longer. The small bouquet of wildflowers lay on the passenger seat. Rebecca's favorites, the same ones that had grown wild around their ranch when they first bought it. She had always said they were more beautiful than any store-bought flowers could ever be. Garrett parked at the edge of the cemetery, his boots crunching on gravel as he stepped out. The morning air held the sharp bite of early autumn, and fallen leaves scattered across the neat rows of headstones. The silence pressed in around him, broken only by the distant call of birds and the whisper of wind through the trees. His feet felt like lead as he walked the path he'd memorized during the funeral. Each step brought him closer to the polished granite marker that bore his wife's name. The sight of it made his chest tighten with a fresh wave of grief. Rebecca Mitchell, beloved wife and guardian angel, gone too soon, but forever in our hearts. Garrett knelt beside the headstone, laying the wildflowers against its smooth surface. His calloused fingers traced the letters of her name, and for a long moment, he couldn't find his voice. When he finally spoke, the words came out rough and broken. "I'm sorry it took me so long to come," he whispered. I couldn't." He drew a shaky breath. "I miss you so much, Beck. The house is so quiet without you. Everything is quiet without you." The morning sun warmed his back as he knelt there, trying to find the right words to express the ocean of regret and love that churned inside him. But how could he explain to a headstone what he hadn't been able to tell her in life? How much she meant to him? How empty his world was without her? A sound cut through his thoughts, the unmistakable sound of children crying. Garrett's head snapped up, his military training automatically assessing the situation. The sobs were coming from nearby, just a few plots over. He rose to his feet, scanning the cemetery. There, not 20 yards away, 2 small figures huddled together beside another headstone. His protective instincts kicked in at the sight of them. They couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old, and they were completely alone. As he watched, one of the children placed a handful of wilted flowers on the grave, while the other one spoke through her tears. "We miss you so much. You were our angel." Garrett moved closer, his footsteps deliberately heavy enough to alert them to his presence. As he approached, he could see they were identical twin girls, their dark curly hair tangled by the wind, their small frames shaking with sobs. Their clothes looked worn and a size too small, and something about their vulnerable position made his heart clench. "Hey there," he said softly, keeping his voice gentle to avoid startling them. "Are you two okay?" The girls jumped slightly, turning to face him with matching tear-stained faces. Their large brown eyes widened at the sight of him, and they instinctively moved closer together. One of them, he couldn't tell which, stepped slightly in front of her sister in a protective gesture that seemed far too mature for such a young child. "We're fine, mister," she said, trying to sound brave despite her trembling voice. "We're just visiting our angel." Garrett crouched down to their level, maintaining a careful distance. "Your angel?" he asked gently. The other twin wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Miss Rebecca," she explained, her voice wobbling. "She always took care of us, but now she's gone to heaven." The words hit Garrett like a physical blow. Rebecca? His Rebecca? He looked at the headstone the girls had been visiting, but it wasn't his wife's. It belonged to someone named Sarah Matthews, deceased 15 years ago. "Miss Rebecca?" he repeated, his mind spinning. "Rebecca Mitchell." Both girls nodded, and the braver one spoke again. "She brought us food and clothes and books. She said we were her special secret and that someday everything would be better." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "But now she's gone, and we don't know what to do." Garrett's training kicked in, helping him maintain his composure despite the shock. "I'm Garrett," he said carefully. "I was Rebecca's husband." The twins exchanged a quick look, then the second one stepped forward. "She talked about you," she said softly. "She said you were a hero who helped people." "I'm Callie," the first twin offered, seeming to decide he was trustworthy. "And this is Chloe." "It's nice to meet you, Callie and Chloe." Garrett's mind raced with questions. Who were these children? Why had Rebecca been secretly helping them? Why were they alone in a cemetery? But he could see how fragile they were, how close to breaking down completely. "Can you tell me where your parents are?" Callie's face clouded. "Mama's at work. She works lots of jobs. We're not supposed to tell anyone about Miss Rebecca helping us." "She said it had to be a secret," Chloe added, twisting her hands in her worn sweater. "But now she's gone, and we're so hungry, and Mama's been crying all the time." The protective instinct that had served Garrett through countless missions surged forward. These little girls were clearly in trouble, and somehow they had been important to Rebecca, important enough for her to help them in secret, to become their angel. He looked between their tear-stained faces and the wilted flowers they'd brought to the cemetery, his heart breaking all over again, not just for his own loss this time, but for these children who had lost their guardian angel. Whatever was going on here, he knew he couldn't walk away. Rebecca had been protecting these girls, and now they were alone and afraid. The wind picked up, making both girls shiver in their thin clothes. Garrett's training told him to proceed with caution, to gather more information before taking action. But his heart, the part of him that had been frozen since Rebecca's death, told him something else entirely. These children had been important to his wife, and now they needed help. Garrett knelt beside the twins, his mind racing to make sense of their connection to Rebecca. "Can you tell me more about how my wife helped you?" Callie, who seemed to be the more outspoken of the two, wiped her nose with her sleeve. "Miss Rebecca came every Tuesday and Friday. She brought us groceries and sometimes new clothes." Her eyes brightened slightly. "And books? She taught us how to read better." "She helped Mama too," Chloe added softly. "When Mama was too sick to work, Miss Rebecca made sure we had enough to eat." The mention of their sick mother sent a fresh wave of worry through Garrett. "Where do you live? Maybe I can help, like Rebecca did." The twins exchanged uncertain glances. "We're not supposed to take strangers home," Callie said, though her resolve seemed to waver. "But you're Miss Rebecca's husband." "And she said you help people," Chloe chimed in. Garrett nodded solemnly. "That's right. I'm a Navy SEAL. That means I protect people. It's my job to help those who need it." After another silent exchange between the sisters, Callie grabbed his hand. Her small fingers felt cold against his palm. "Okay, we'll show you." They led him out of the cemetery and through the streets of the small town. With each block they walked, the neat houses and well-kept lawns gave way to more run-down buildings. Storefronts with peeling paint and boarded-up windows lined the cracked sidewalks. The girls navigated the streets with the confidence of those who walked them daily, though they stayed close to Garrett's sides. Finally, they turned onto a gravel road that led to Pine Grove Trailer Park. The sign hung crooked, its letters faded and chipped. Garrett's heart sank as they made their way through rows of mobile homes in various states of disrepair. Some had makeshift repairs, tarps covering roof damage, plywood replacing broken windows. The twins led him to one of the smallest trailers near the back of the park. The mobile home's white exterior had yellowed with age, and rust streaked down from the window frames. A small wooden step led to the door, its boards warped and weathered. Plastic containers caught drips from the leaking roof. "Mama!" Callie called out as they approached. "We brought someone to help." The door creaked open and a woman appeared, her thin frame filling the doorway. Garrett's breath caught at the sight of her. She couldn't have been more than 30, but illness had carved deep hollows in her cheeks and dark circles under her eyes. Despite her gaunt appearance, he could see something familiar in her features, especially around the eyes. The moment she saw him, terror flashed across her face. "Girls, come here," she commanded, her voice hoarse but firm. "Right now." The twins hesitated, but something in their mother's tone sent them scurrying up the steps. She pulled them behind her with trembling hands, her eyes never leaving Garrett. "I'm sorry if they bothered you, sir," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "They shouldn't have brought you here." "Mrs. Hawthorne?" Garrett kept his distance, recognizing the fear in her stance. "I'm Garrett Mitchell, Rebecca's husband." Her face went even paler, if that was possible. "Please," she whispered. "Please, we don't want any trouble." "I'm not here to cause trouble," Garrett assured her, keeping his voice gentle. "I found the girls at the cemetery. They told me Rebecca was helping you." Priscilla's grip on her daughters tightened. "We're managing just fine now. Thank you for bringing them home, but you should go." But Garrett couldn't ignore the signs of poverty and illness surrounding them. The bare cupboards visible through the open door. The medical bills scattered on a small table. The way Priscilla swayed slightly, as if standing took all her strength. "Rebecca was helping you for a reason," he said firmly. "Whatever that reason was, I want to help too." "You can't," Priscilla's voice cracked. "You don't understand. It's complicated." "Then help me understand." Garrett took a careful step forward. "Rebecca was my wife. If she thought you needed help, there must have been a good reason." Tears welled in Priscilla's eyes. "Please, just go. We've caused enough trouble for your family." "Mama," Chloe tugged at her mother's shirt. "We're hungry, and Miss Rebecca said he was good, remember?" Something in Priscilla seemed to break at her daughter's words. She pressed a hand to her mouth, stifling a sob. The twins wrapped their arms around her waist, and Garrett could see how much effort it took for her to remain standing. "At least let me buy you some groceries," Garrett offered. "For the girls. Rebecca would want me to help." At the mention of his wife's name, Priscilla's shoulders slumped in defeat. "You're just like her," she whispered. She wouldn't take no for an answer either. Mama needs medicine too, Callie spoke up, ignoring her mother's attempt to shush her. The doctor said she has to take it every day, but we ran out. Garrett's concern deepened. What kind of medicine? It's nothing, Priscilla insisted, but her body betrayed her as she stumbled slightly. The twins struggled to keep her upright. It's not nothing. Garrett moved forward instinctively to help, but stopped when Priscilla flinched. Please let me help. Whatever's going on, whatever reason Rebecca had for keeping this secret, it doesn't matter right now. What matters is making sure you and the girls are okay. Priscilla looked at him for a long moment, her eyes, so familiar, yet different from Rebecca's, searching his face. Finally, she spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. The cancer came back, she admitted. The treatments, I can't afford them anymore. I can barely keep food on the table. Her voice broke. Rebecca was the only one who helped us, the only one who cared what happened to us. The pieces started falling into place. Rebecca's secret trips, the extra groceries she bought, the medical books he'd found her reading. But there were still so many questions. Why had she kept this family a secret? What was their connection to her? Before he could ask, Priscilla swayed dangerously. This time, Garrett didn't hesitate. He stepped forward and caught her before she could fall, helping her into the trailer while the twins hovered anxiously nearby. Inside the cramped trailer, Garrett helped Priscilla settle onto a worn couch while the twins rushed to bring her a glass of water. The small space felt suffocating, made worse by the visible signs of poverty, bare cupboards, peeling wallpaper, and a stack of unpaid medical bills scattered across a rickety coffee table. Please. Priscilla's voice trembled as she clutched the water glass with shaking hands. I know what this must look like to someone like you, but please, don't report us to social services. The girls, they're all I have. Garrett frowned, taking in her terrified expression. Report you? Why would I do that? You're military, she said, her eyes darting to his rigid posture. Law enforcement types always see things in black and white. And my record? She trailed off, pulling the twins closer to her sides. What record? Garrett asked, trying to keep his voice gentle despite his growing confusion. What aren't you telling me? Callie looked up at her mother. Mama, you're shaking. I'm okay, baby. Priscilla smoothed her daughter's hair, but Garrett could see the effort it took for her to maintain composure. Mr. Mitchell, I know you must have questions about Rebecca, about why she was helping us. She never mentioned you, Garrett said. In 5 years of marriage, she never once said anything about bringing food and money to a family in need. Priscilla's eyes filled with tears. She was protecting me, protecting all of us, really. She took a shuddering breath. Rebecca, she was my sister. The words hit Garrett like a physical blow. He staggered back, catching himself against the wall. That's impossible. Rebecca didn't have a sister. She told me her only sibling died when she was young. As far as our parents were concerned, I did die, Priscilla said bitterly. 15 years ago, when I got pregnant at 16. Twin girls, quite the scandal for a prominent family in a small town. She hugged her daughters tighter. They gave me 2 choices. Give up my babies for adoption, or get out. I chose my girls. Garrett's mind reeled as he looked at the twins with new eyes. Their familiar features suddenly made sense. They had Rebecca's nose, her determined chin. They were his nieces, Rebecca's nieces. But why wouldn't she tell me? He asked, his voice hoarse. Because of what happened after, Priscilla said. I was 17, alone with 2 babies, made some bad choices, fell in with the wrong people, got caught with drugs, possession with intent to distribute. Her voice cracked. I served 18 months, lost custody of the girls until I got clean and proved I could care for them. She looked up at Garrett, her eyes pleading. Rebecca was the only one who stood by me. She visited me in jail, helped me get my GED, found us this place when I got out. but she knew how you felt about law and order, about people who break the rules. She was afraid. Afraid I wouldn't understand, Garrett finished, remembering countless conversations where he'd expressed his black and white views on right and wrong. How many times had he judged others without knowing their full story? Miss Rebecca said Mama made mistakes, but that doesn't make her a bad person, Chloe said solemnly. She said everyone deserves a second chance. Garrett felt the weight of his wife's secret pressing down on him. How had he missed this? The extra groceries, the mysterious errands, the medical books? It all made sense now. When did the cancer come back? He asked quietly. 3 months ago, Priscilla wiped her eyes. Rebecca was helping with the medical bills, but now... She gestured helplessly at the pile of overdue notices. Why didn't you come to the funeral? The question had been nagging at him. I watched from a distance, Priscilla admitted. I couldn't risk our parents seeing me, and I didn't want to cause any trouble for Rebecca's memory. She worked so hard to keep our worlds separate. The twins had been unusually quiet, watching the adults with solemn expressions. Now Callie spoke up. Mama, can we show Uncle Garrett the pictures? Uncle Garrett? The title sent a jolt through him. Chloe ran to a shelf and returned with a shoebox. Inside were dozens of photographs. Rebecca with the twins as babies, toddlers, young girls. Rebecca helping them blow out birthday candles, reading them stories, teaching them to ride bikes. A whole secret life his wife had lived without him. She loved them so much, Priscilla said softly. Every Tuesday and Friday like clockwork. She'd bring groceries, help with homework, take them to doctor appointments when I was too sick. The girls were the daughters she never had. Garrett picked up a photo of Rebecca hugging the twins, all three of them laughing at something off camera. Her smile was radiant, full of joy he'd rarely seen at home. Why didn't she trust me with this? It wasn't about trust, Priscilla said. Rebecca told me how dedicated you are to your principles, how much you value honor and following the rules. She was afraid knowing about my past would put you in an impossible position between your sense of duty and your family. So she carried this burden alone, Garrett said, his throat tight. Trying to protect everyone? That was Rebecca, Priscilla smiled sadly, always taking care of others, even when it hurt her. The girls and I, we're not your responsibility. I understand if you want to walk away. Garrett looked at the twins, his nieces, who were watching him with Rebecca's eyes. He thought about his wife, secretly caring for her sister's family while maintaining the picture-perfect life he expected. The weight of her sacrifice, her lonely mission of mercy, broke his heart. No, he said firmly. Rebecca may have kept you a secret from me, but you're family, and I don't abandon family. Priscilla's composure finally broke. She covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking with sobs. The twins immediately wrapped their arms around her, and after a moment's hesitation, Garrett joined them, completing the circle of embrace. In that moment, surrounded by the family he never knew he had, Garrett felt Rebecca's presence more strongly than he had since her death. She had left him more than just memories. She had left him a mission, a chance to prove he could see beyond his rigid worldview and open his heart to unconditional love. We're going to figure this out, he promised, holding his newfound family close. Together. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the trailer's grimy windows as Priscilla sank deeper into her worn armchair. Her hands trembled as she sorted through a stack of papers, medical bills spilling onto the floor. The girls, she said softly, they don't know how bad it is. I've tried to protect them from the truth. She pressed a tissue to her mouth, suppressing a cough. Rebecca was the only one who knew everything. Garrett sat on the threadbare couch, still processing the revelation about his wife's secret life. Tell me everything, he said. I need to understand. Every Tuesday and Friday like clockwork, Rebecca would come, Priscilla explained, her voice weak but determined. She'd bring groceries, help the girls with homework, take them to the park while I rested. When the cancer came back, she started paying for my treatments. She gestured to the pile of medical bills. No insurance. The hospital only agreed to continue chemotherapy because Rebecca guaranteed the payments. But now, her voice cracked. How long? Garrett asked, dreading the answer. Doctors say maybe 3 months. The cancer's spread to my liver. Priscilla wiped her eyes. Rebecca promised she'd take the girls when I'm gone. She was going to tell you everything, make you understand. But then she died first, Garrett finished, his heart heavy. The twins played quietly in the corner with worn dolls, but Garrett could see them stealing worried glances at their mother. They were too young to fully understand, but they sensed something was terribly wrong. Last week, social services came for a welfare check, Priscilla continued, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. They're concerned about my ability to care for the girls during treatment. The caseworker said. She choked back a sob. She said they're having trouble finding a foster home willing to take both girls. They might have to separate them. Separate them? Garrett's military training couldn't mask the horror in his voice. They're twins. Most foster families can only take one child, Priscilla explained. The system's overwhelmed. Rebecca was their only hope of staying together. She had everything planned. She'd even started preparing the guest room at your ranch. Garrett's mind flashed to the mysterious home improvement projects Rebecca had started before his deployment. The new bunk beds, the cheerful yellow paint, the extra dressers. All this time, he'd thought she was just keeping busy while he was away. Look in that drawer, Priscilla pointed to a small cabinet. Top right. Garrett found a manila envelope stuffed with documents. Inside were partially completed adoption papers with Rebecca's signature, dated just 2 weeks before her death. She'd been planning to make it official. She was going to surprise you when you got home, Priscilla said. She told me you had such a big heart under that tough exterior. She knew once you met the girls, you'd understand why she had to help us. Callie approached them hesitantly, clutching a photo album. Can we show Uncle Garrett our special book? Priscilla nodded, and the little girl climbed onto the couch beside him. Chloe quickly joined her sister, and together they opened the album. Miss Rebecca made this for us, Chloe explained, pointing to a photo of the twins in matching Christmas dresses. She took pictures every time she visited. Page after page revealed the secret life his wife had lived. Rebecca teaching the girls to bake cookies, helping them build a snowman, reading stories at bedtime. In every photo, her smile was radiant, her joy unmistakable. She loved them so much, Priscilla said, watching Garrett's face. The daughter she never had. When we found out I was sick again, she didn't hesitate. She said, "They're my girls too. I'll raise them as my own." A harsh coughing fit seized Priscilla, and the twins immediately rushed to her side. They moved with practiced efficiency, one bringing water while the other adjusted her oxygen tube. Garrett realized with a pang how accustomed they were to caring for their sick mother. The social worker is coming back next week, Priscilla said when she could speak again. Without Rebecca, without a guaranteed placement for both girls, she couldn't finish the sentence. They can't split us up, Callie cried suddenly. Miss Rebecca promised we'd stay together forever. She said we were a package deal, Chloe added, tears spilling down her cheeks. She said family always sticks together. Garrett watched the sisters cling to each other, their fear palpable. He thought about Rebecca, secretly preparing their home for 2 little girls while he was deployed, planning to expand their family in the most unexpected way. She'd seen past his rigid beliefs about right and wrong, knowing these innocent children deserved love regardless of their mother's past mistakes. The social worker's name, he said, his voice rough with emotion. "What is it?" "Ms. Thompson," Priscilla replied. "Why?" "Because I need to call her," Garrett said firmly. "Rebecca made these girls a promise, and I intend to keep it." The hope that flashed across Priscilla's face was almost painful to witness. "Garrett, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do," he interrupted. "Rebecca saw something in me that I'm only beginning to understand. She knew I could learn to open my heart, to see beyond black and white." He looked at the twins, who were watching him with Rebecca's eyes. "These girls are family. And in the Navy SEALs, we never leave family behind." Priscilla covered her face with trembling hands, overwhelmed by emotion. The twins moved closer to Garrett, drawn by the strength and certainty in his voice. "Miss Rebecca said you were a hero," Callie said solemnly. "She said you save people?" "That's right," Garrett replied, his throat tight. "And sometimes heroes need to learn new ways to save people, ways that have nothing to do with military operations or combat missions." He reached for his phone, already planning his next steps. Rebecca had left him more than just memories. She'd left him a mission of mercy, a chance to prove he could be the man she always believed he was. Garrett's truck kicked up dust along the winding road to his ranch, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. The late afternoon sky stretched endlessly above the Montana landscape, but he felt suffocated by the weight of everything he'd learned. Rebecca's secret life, her hidden kindness, the family she'd never told him about. It all swirled in his mind like a sandstorm. He pulled up to the sprawling ranch house, the building that had once felt like a sanctuary, now seeming to mock him with its secrets. The guest room window caught his eye. Rebecca's mysterious renovation project that suddenly made perfect sense. She'd been preparing a home for 2 little girls while he was deployed, planning to surprise him with an instant family. Inside, he wandered from room to room, seeing everything through new eyes. The extra dressers in the guest room, the cheerful yellow paint, the bunk beds she'd insisted on buying. "Just in case we have visitors," she'd said during their last video call. He'd believed her, never questioning why his practical wife would suddenly care about guest accommodations. "Did I even know you?" he whispered to the empty house. The sound of vehicles approaching pulled him from his thoughts. Through the window, he watched 3 familiar trucks roll up his driveway. His team had arrived, right on schedule, exactly when he knew they would. Navy SEALs took care of their own. Captain Wade Torres led the group onto his porch. Garrett opened the door before they could knock, facing his longtime friend and fellow commander. "Heard you've been going through some stuff," Wade said, his expression concerned. "Thought you could use some backup?" The other men filed in behind Wade, Mike Peterson and Chris Rodriguez, members of his tight-knit SEAL team. They carried cases of beer and took up positions around his living room with military precision, creating a casual intervention. "We're worried about you, Commander," Mike said, cracking open a beer. "Word is, you've been visiting the wrong side of town." Garrett accepted a beer but didn't drink. "You've been checking up on me." "Of course we have," Wade replied. "You're family. And when we heard you were getting mixed up with some ex-con and her kids..." He shook his head. "That's not like you, Garrett." "Rebecca had a sister," Garrett said quietly. "Did any of you know that? Because I sure as hell didn't." The men exchanged glances. Chris leaned forward. "Look, boss, whatever your wife was involved with, it's not your responsibility now. You don't owe these people anything." "These people?" Garrett's voice took on a dangerous edge. "You mean my nieces? 6-year-old little girls who are about to lose their mother to cancer?" "Girls who are the children of a convicted drug offender," Wade pointed out. "Think about your career, Garrett. You're up for promotion to senior commander. Getting involved with a criminal family could destroy everything you've worked for." Garrett stood abruptly, pacing the room. Rebecca was helping them. She was planning to adopt those girls. But she didn't, Mike said gently. And she's gone now. You have to think about your future. My future? Garrett laughed bitterly. My future died with Rebecca. But those girls, they're innocent. They're going to be split up, sent to different foster homes. Rebecca promised them they'd stay together. Rebecca made that promise, not you, Wade insisted. You're not responsible for her choices. Garrett stopped at the window, staring out at the Montana sunset. You didn't see them at her grave? You didn't hear them calling her their angel? He turned to face his brothers in arms. She was their only hope, and she believed I would understand, that I would help them when the time came. This isn't a military operation, Chris argued. You can't save everyone, Commander. Maybe not, Garrett agreed, but I can save these two. Rebecca saw something in me. Something beyond the rigid, by-the-book SEAL commander. She knew I could learn to open my heart. Wade stood, placing a hand on Garrett's shoulder. We're just trying to protect you, brother. Getting involved in this situation, it could cost you everything. Everything? Garrett shrugged off his friend's hand. I lost everything when Rebecca died. But maybe she left me something too. A chance to be the man she always believed I could be. The brass won't see it that way, Mike warned. They'll see a decorated commander throwing away his career for the family of an ex-con. Garrett walked to the guest room, his team following. He pushed open the door, revealing the cheerful space Rebecca had prepared. My wife spent her last months creating a home for two little girls who have nothing. She saw past their mother's mistakes. She understood that family isn't about perfect records or spotless reputations. Garrett, Wade tried one last time. Please think this through. You're grieving. Don't make a decision that could destroy your life. My life? Garrett turned to his friends, his voice firm. My life has been about following orders, seeing everything in black and white. Rebecca lived in color. She saw the beauty in mercy, in second chances. Those girls at her grave, they showed me what real courage looks like. They've been taking care of their dying mother, facing a world that's ready to tear them apart, and they still believe in angels. He picked up a small photo frame from the dresser. Rebecca's last Christmas card photo. Her smile seemed to reach through time, challenging him to be better than his fears. I've spent my career saving people in war zones, he continued. Maybe it's time I learned to save people here at home. Not with weapons or tactics, but with the kind of courage Rebecca had. The courage to love without conditions. His team stood silent, recognizing the resolve in their commander's voice. They'd followed him into battle countless times, trusting his judgment. But this was different. This was personal, messy, complicated. You're really going to do this? Wade asked finally. Risk everything for strangers? They're not strangers, Garrett replied. They're family, Rebecca's family, and she was right. I'm ready to be more than just a soldier. I'm ready to be the man she always saw in me. The men exchanged looks, recognizing that their intervention had failed. Their commander had made his decision, and like every mission he'd ever led, he would see it through to the end. The law office of Peterson and Associates occupied a sleek building in downtown Helena, a stark contrast to the trailer park where Callie and Chloe lived. Garrett sat rigid in an expensive leather chair, his military posture unchanged as Sarah Peterson, a sharp-eyed family law specialist, reviewed his case. Commander Mitchell, she said, adjusting her reading glasses, I need to be completely honest with you. This won't be easy. She spread several documents across her mahogany desk. You're asking for custody of children you've just met, with no blood relation while maintaining an active military career. The courts tend to favor stability. Garrett leaned forward. Rebecca was preparing to adopt them. She made promises. Verbal promises don't carry legal weight, Sarah explained gently. And while I understand your wife's intentions, She never initiated formal adoption proceedings. We're starting from scratch. Then tell me what I need to do, Garrett insisted. Whatever it takes. Sarah sighed, pulling out a thick folder. First, we need to file an emergency petition for temporary guardianship. Social Services is already moving to place the girls in foster care, and they're planning to separate them due to limited placement options. The thought of the twins being torn apart made Garrett's jaw clench. That can't happen. I agree. But you need to understand what you're getting into. Sarah's expression turned serious. The courts will scrutinize everything. Your military deployments, your lack of parenting experience, your emotional state as a recent widower. They'll question your motives and your ability to provide a stable home. I have a home, Garrett countered. A ranch house Rebecca prepared for them, financial stability, a support system. All important factors, Sarah nodded, but they'll want to see more than material provisions. You'll need to demonstrate genuine emotional connection with the girls, understanding of their needs, and a concrete plan for their care during any future deployments. Before Garrett could respond, his phone buzzed. A text from Priscilla. Please come. Girls need you. Go, Sarah said, noting his expression. We'll continue this later. But Commander? She waited until he met her eyes. Start documenting everything. Every visit, every interaction. We need to build a case showing you're already a presence in their lives. 20 minutes later, Garrett pulled up to the trailer park. The twins were sitting on their small front steps, homework spread around them. Their faces lit up when they saw his truck. Mr. Garrett, Callie called out, while Chloe quickly gathered their scattered papers. He approached carefully, still uncertain how to interact with children. How's the homework going? Math is hard, Chloe admitted quietly. Really hard, Callie agreed. Mama usually helps, but I'm too tired today. Priscilla's weak voice came from the doorway. She looked worse than she had yesterday, her skin almost translucent. Garrett straightened. Maybe I could help? I use math a lot in my work. The girls exchanged hopeful looks. You know fractions? Callie asked. I sure do. Garrett settled onto the step beside them, noting how they instinctively made space for him. Let's see what we're dealing with. For the next hour, he guided them through their math problems, discovering that patience came more naturally than he'd expected. Priscilla watched from her chair inside, tears occasionally slipping down her cheeks. When the homework was done, Chloe hesitantly showed him a drawing she'd made. It's our angel, she explained, Aunt Rebecca. Garrett's throat tightened as he studied the crayon artwork. Rebecca's figure had wings and a bright smile, surrounded by hearts and flowers. She loved you both very much, he managed. Are they really going to send us away? Callie whispered, her small hand finding his. To different places? No, Garrett said firmly, surprising himself with the fierce protectiveness in his voice. I'm not going to let that happen. Later that evening, after the girls were inside getting ready for bed, Priscilla called him to her side. The social worker came today, she said weakly. They've found separate placements. Next week, they say. I've hired a lawyer, Garrett told her. I'm filing for guardianship. Priscilla's eyes filled with tears. Why? You don't even know us. I knew Rebecca, he replied simply, and I'm starting to know your daughters. They're extraordinary children. They are? Priscilla's voice cracked. But you have your career, your life. Taking on 2 6-year-olds? Rebecca saw something in me I didn't see in myself, Garrett interrupted. She believed I could be more than just a soldier. Maybe she was right. The next few days fell into a pattern. Garrett would handle legal meetings in the morning, then spend afternoons with the girls. He learned their routines, their personalities, their fears. Callie was the more outspoken twin, quick to laugh but also quick to worry. Chloe was quieter, thoughtful, with an artistic streak that reminded him of Rebecca. They taught him games he'd never played, showed him their favorite books, and slowly began to trust him with their hopes and fears. In return, he shared carefully chosen stories about their Aunt Rebecca, watching their eyes light up at each new detail about the woman they'd known only as their angel. A week into his custody battle, Sarah called with an update. "The judge has concerns," she warned. "Your military status, the possibility of deployment." "I'll resign my commission if I have to," Garrett said without hesitation. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," Sarah replied. "But Commander, the fact that you're willing to consider it, that's exactly what we need to show the court." That afternoon, he arrived at the trailer to find Callie and Chloe waiting with unexpected news. "We made you something," they announced in unison, pulling him inside. On their small kitchen table sat a handmade card, decorated with glitter and careful 6-year-old handwriting. Inside, they'd drawn a picture of themselves with Garrett, standing in front of what he recognized as his ranch house. Above the drawing, they'd written, "Thank you for being our new angel." Garrett stared at the card, his vision blurring. In that moment, he understood what Rebecca had known all along, that sometimes the greatest acts of courage had nothing to do with battlefields or medals. Sometimes courage meant opening your heart to love, even when it scared you more than any mission ever had. "Do you like it?" Chloe asked anxiously. Garrett pulled both girls into a gentle hug, their small arms wrapping trustingly around him. "I love it," he whispered, "and I promise you both, we're going to be okay." Sarah Peterson's office felt colder than usual as she delivered the news. Garrett sat rigid in his chair, his military training the only thing keeping his composure intact. "Judge Harrison Blackwell," Sarah said, sliding a newspaper across her desk. "He's filed a petition claiming paternal rights to the twins." Garrett stared at the photo of a distinguished-looking man with silver hair, standing at a campaign podium. The headline read, "State Senate Candidate Seeks Reunion with Long-Lost Daughters." "Priscilla never mentioned their father," Garrett said, his voice tight, "because she thought he was long gone." Sarah's expression darkened. 15 years ago, when she told him she was pregnant, he denied everything and threatened to destroy her reputation if she pursued paternity claims. Now he's spinning it as a heartwarming story of redemption for his campaign. Garrett's hands clenched. He abandoned them, left Priscilla alone at 16. And now he's a sitting judge with powerful connections throughout the state legal system. Sarah leaned forward. "Commander, this changes everything. Blood relation trumps third-party custody claims in most cases." "He doesn't care about those girls," Garrett argued. "He's never even met them." "I agree." Sarah shuffled through new court documents. "But his legal team is already moving aggressively. They're questioning your fitness as a guardian, citing potential PTSD and the psychological impact of your wife's death." Garrett felt his jaw tighten. "They're using my service against me? They're using everything they can." Sarah's voice softened. "This morning, Judge Blackwell's team filed a motion suggesting your military career makes you inherently unstable. They've requested your complete service record and psychological evaluations." Before Garrett could respond, his phone buzzed. A text from Priscilla. "He's here. Please hurry." Garrett was on his feet instantly. "Blackwell's at the trailer?" Sarah's eyes widened. "Go. But remember, anything you say or do can be used against you in court. Be careful." Garrett's truck kicked up dust as he sped toward the trailer park. When he arrived, an expensive black SUV was parked outside Priscilla's home. 2 men in suits stood guard while raised voices carried from inside. "You can't just walk in here after 15 years?" Priscilla's weak voice carried more anger than Garrett had ever heard from her. "I'm their father, Priscilla." A smooth, authoritative voice replied. I'm offering them opportunities you never could. Private schools, proper medical care, a real home. Garrett entered to find Judge Blackwell standing in the small living room, his tailored suit absurdly out of place among the worn furniture. The twins huddled behind their mother, who swayed slightly from the effort of standing. "Who are you?" Blackwell demanded, turning to face Garrett. "Commander Garrett Mitchell." He moved to stand beside Priscilla, steadying her with a gentle hand. "I'm the girl's guardian." "Temporary guardian," Blackwell corrected with a cold smile. "A situation that will be remedied shortly. I've reviewed your file, Commander. Multiple deployments, classified missions, recent trauma, hardly suitable conditions for raising children." "Unlike abandoning them before birth," Garrett countered quietly. Blackwell's smile never wavered. "People change, Commander. I've spent years building a reputation for justice and family values. I'm here to make things right. By using them as campaign props? By giving them the life they deserve?" Blackwell glanced at the girls, who shrank further behind their mother. "My daughters will have every advantage." "They're not props for your campaign," Priscilla spat, "and they're terrified of you." "They'll adjust." Blackwell straightened his jacket. "My lawyers will be in touch. I suggest you all prepare yourselves for changes." He headed for the door, then paused. "Oh, and Commander, I'd hate to see your distinguished military record tarnished by a messy custody battle. Sometimes it's better to walk away." After he left, Priscilla collapsed into a chair, her face ashen. The twins immediately climbed into her lap, tears streaming down their faces. "He can't take us, can he?" Callie whispered. Garrett knelt before them, his heart aching at their fear. "I won't let him," he promised, even as he wondered how he could fight a man with so much power and influence. "He's not our daddy," Chloe said firmly. "We don't want him." Garrett gathered all three of them into a protective embrace, his military mind already strategizing. He'd faced impossible odds before, completed missions others deemed suicidal. This was just another battle, and he had too much to lose to surrender. Back at the ranch, Garrett sat at Rebecca's desk, surrounded by stacks of papers and folders she'd left behind. He'd avoided going through her things, the pain still too raw, but now he needed answers. His hands trembled slightly as he opened the bottom drawer where she kept her most important documents. Inside, beneath tax returns and insurance papers, he found a thick manila envelope labeled Twins Emergency. His heart stopped for a moment. Even in death, Rebecca was still revealing her secrets. The envelope contained newspaper clippings, court records, and handwritten notes in Rebecca's neat handwriting. As he spread them across the desk, a pattern emerged that made his blood run cold. Article after article detailed wealthy couples suddenly receiving miracle adoptions through Judge Blackwell's court, bypassing normal waiting periods and background checks. Rebecca had highlighted specific cases: a Chicago executive who gained custody of twins within weeks of application, despite a documented history of domestic violence; a California tech mogul who received a baby girl days after a substantial donation to Blackwell's previous campaign. Each adoption was processed through Blackwell's court, with minimal documentation and maximum speed. "Oh, Rebecca," Garrett whispered, reading her detailed notes. "You were building a case against him." His wife had meticulously tracked bank records showing large deposits to offshore accounts following each adoption. She documented meetings between Blackwell and desperate parents, compiled witness statements from court clerks who'd been silenced or transferred after questioning procedures. A yellow sticky note caught his attention. Meeting with Sarah Chen, Tuesday. The date was just 3 days before Rebecca's death. Below it was a phone number. Garrett's hands shook as he dialed. A woman answered on the second ring. Sarah Chen speaking. "This is Commander Garrett Mitchell. My wife Rebecca was supposed to meet with you about Judge Blackwell's adoption cases." Silence filled the line. Then, "I've been waiting for this call. Rebecca never showed up for our meeting. When I heard about her death..." Sarah paused. "Commander, What I have to tell you needs to be in person, and we need to be careful. 2 weeks after your wife died, my office was broken into. Only my adoption files were taken. I'll come to you, Garrett said. Where? Number public places only. Meet me at Carter's Diner in an hour. Sit in the last booth. She hung up. Garrett stared at the evidence spread before him. His military training kicked in, analyzing the situation with cold clarity. This wasn't just about the twins anymore. Rebecca had uncovered a corruption network that treated children like commodities, and it had possibly cost her her life. He gathered the documents carefully, securing them in his gun safe. If Blackwell was willing to threaten his military career over a custody dispute, there was no telling what he'd do to protect his criminal enterprise. The weight of Rebecca's final mission settled on his shoulders. She died trying to protect not just Callie and Chloe, but countless other children from Blackwell's corrupt system. Now it was up to him to finish what she'd started. The first warning came at dusk. Garrett was checking the ranch's perimeter when he spotted fresh tire tracks cutting across his gravel driveway. They led to his front porch, where a manila envelope waited. Inside was a single photo of him meeting Sarah Chen at the diner, taken through the restaurant's window. Written across it in red marker were the words, "Walk away or die." Garrett's jaw tightened as he studied the tracks. At least 2 vehicles, heavy ones. They wanted him to know they'd been here. Amateur move. A real threat wouldn't announce itself. He was wrong. The attack came just after midnight. Garrett was reviewing Rebecca's files when the first window shattered. Years of combat training kicked in as he rolled away from the desk, glass spraying where he'd sat seconds before. The distinctive pop of silenced weapons filled the air. 3 armed figures in black tactical gear burst through his front door. Another 2 came through the broken window. Their movements were coordinated, professional. Not common thugs. These were trained killers. Garrett reached the gun safe just as the first attacker rounded the corner. Without hesitation, he drove his elbow into the man's throat, grabbing the attacker's weapon as he fell. In one fluid motion, Garrett used the fallen man as a shield against incoming fire. "Target's armed!" someone shouted. Bullets tore into furniture and walls. Garrett's home became a war zone. He moved room to room with lethal efficiency, using the darkness and his intimate knowledge of the layout to his advantage. A lifetime of special operations training turned every household item into a weapon, every doorway into an ambush point. In the kitchen, he caught one attacker with a cast iron pan to the skull. The sickening crunch was followed by the man's limp body hitting the floor. Another tried to flank him through the mudroom. Garrett met him with Rebecca's prized ceramic vase, followed by 3 rapid strikes that left the attacker unconscious. The remaining men retreated to regroup, clearly not expecting such fierce resistance. Garrett used their moment of confusion to reach the breaker box, plunging the ranch into total darkness. Now they were in his world. "He's just one man," a voice hissed in the darkness. "Spread out and finish it." "One Navy SEAL," Garrett corrected quietly, coming up behind the speaker. The man never saw the blow that knocked him out. The last 2 attackers fired blindly, giving away their positions. Garrett moved like a ghost through his own home, disabling them with brutal efficiency. When silence finally fell, 5 unconscious bodies lay scattered through his destroyed living room. Garrett secured them with zip ties, his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. These men were just the tip of the iceberg. Blackwell was sending a message. He'd keep coming until Garrett and Rebecca's evidence were eliminated. As Garrett surveyed his bullet-riddled home, a chilling realization hit him. If Blackwell was willing to send armed killers after a decorated Navy SEAL, what would he do to 2 defenseless little girls? Callie and Chloe weren't just caught in a custody battle anymore. Their very lives were in danger. He pulled out his phone and dialed Wade. "I need your help," he said when his friend answered. "And I need it now." Garrett sat in his truck outside the sheriff's station, staring at the manila folder in his hands. Inside was everything. Rebecca's notes, bank records showing suspicious payments to Blackwell, and photographs documenting his sister-in-law's secret visits. But it wasn't enough, not by itself. He needed help. Sheriff Laura Martinez was exactly where he expected to find her, behind her desk at 7 in the morning, coffee in hand. Her eyes narrowed as Garrett laid out the evidence. "I've had suspicions about Blackwell for years," she said, spreading the documents across her desk. Families disappearing from the system, adoption records that don't add up. "But he's got friends in high places." "Not for long," Garrett replied, "but I need your badge behind this when it all comes out." The sheriff studied him for a long moment before nodding. "You've got it. And I know some reporters who've been itching to dig into his past. One ally down, more to go." His next stop was harder. The Montana Veterans Hall looked exactly as it had 8 months ago, before his deployment, before Rebecca's death. Inside, he found his old unit gathered for their weekly breakfast, a tradition he'd been avoiding since coming home. Captain Wade Torres spotted him first. The room went quiet as Garrett approached their table. "Those men who attacked me? They're part of something bigger," Garrett began. "Something we can't ignore." He laid out the whole story. Rebecca's secret help to her sister, the twins, Blackwell's corruption, all of it. "This is why we served, to protect the innocent, to fight corruption. I need your help." Wade stood first. "You should have come to us sooner, brother." One by one, his former teammates rose. The message was clear. They had his back. By afternoon, Garrett was sitting in Rebecca's best friend Sarah Chen's living room. Sarah, a local reporter, had been Rebecca's confidant for years. "She was getting scared near the end," Sarah revealed, pulling out her own file of notes. Rebecca found patterns in Blackwell's cases: vulnerable mothers, rushed adoptions, large donations to his campaign from the adoptive parents. She knew he'd do anything to keep it quiet. Sarah's evidence filled crucial gaps in their case. More importantly, her newspaper connections would ensure the story couldn't be buried. At sunset, they gathered at Garrett's ranch. Sheriff Martinez, Wade's team, Sarah, and their growing network of supporters. The kitchen table became their war room, covered in documents and strategy plans. "Blackwell's custody hearing is in 3 days," Garrett explained. "He's counting on his Senate campaign publicity to paint him as a reformed father. Instead, we're going to use that spotlight to expose everything. The press will be all over it," Sarah added. "Once the story breaks, other victims will come forward." Sheriff Martinez tapped the case files. "And I'll have officers ready to move the moment we have enough evidence." Wade checked his weapon. "My team will handle security. No one's getting near those girls." Looking around the room at these people willing to risk everything for justice, Garrett felt something he hadn't since Rebecca's death: hope. But time was running out. Earlier that day, the hospice nurse had called. Priscilla was failing fast. She needed to know her daughters would be safe. "Tomorrow, we start moving pieces into place," Garrett said. "In 3 days, we end this." The county courthouse buzzed with tension as reporters and spectators packed the gallery. Judge Harrison Blackwell sat at the plaintiff's table in an expensive charcoal suit, projecting an image of dignified authority. His campaign manager had carefully staged this moment, positioning photographers to capture his emotional reunion with his daughters. Garrett watched from the defense table as Blackwell's attorney presented a masterfully crafted narrative. Medical records questioned Garrett's psychological stability after combat. Character witnesses praised Blackwell's community service and charitable works. Each piece of testimony felt like another nail in the coffin of Garrett's hopes. "My client has grown immensely from his youthful mistakes," Blackwell's lawyer declared. "He's spent years building a reputation for justice and integrity. Now he simply wants to make amends and provide his daughters the life they deserve." Garrett's hands clenched beneath the table as Blackwell took the stand, his performance perfectly calibrated to draw sympathy. "Not a day goes by that I don't regret my past actions," Blackwell said, his voice thick with rehearsed emotion. "I was young and scared, but I'm ready now to be the father these precious girls need." The presiding judge nodded appreciatively. In the gallery, several reporters scribbled notes about the touching testimony of a changed man. Then it was their turn. Sarah Chen took the stand first, pulling out Rebecca's detailed records. Mrs. Mitchell documented every visit to her sister, every dollar spent helping those girls. She also discovered a pattern in Judge Blackwell's cases. Photographs appeared on the courtroom's display screen. Shots of Blackwell meeting with various couples in parking lots, receiving envelopes. Bank records showed large deposits following rushed adoptions he'd overseen. The judge leaned forward. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Sheriff Martinez stepped up next, presenting case files of suspicious adoptions. Over the past decade, dozens of vulnerable mothers in Judge Blackwell's court have lost their children through rushed proceedings. In each case, the adoptive parents made substantial donations to his campaigns or private accounts. Blackwell's composed facade cracked slightly. His attorney jumped up with objections, but the evidence kept coming. A parade of witnesses followed, mothers who'd lost their children through Blackwell's court, courthouse employees who'd noticed irregularities, even a former associate who'd helped arrange the illegal adoptions. Each testimony added another devastating layer to the picture of corruption. Garrett watched Blackwell's carefully constructed image crumble. The judge's face had gone pale, his hands trembling as he whispered urgently to his lawyer. The final blow came from Wade Torres, who presented surveillance footage from the attack on Garrett's ranch. "We identified the attackers as known associates of Judge Blackwell. Phone records show multiple calls between them in the days before and after the assault." Chaos erupted in the courtroom. Reporters rushed for the doors, racing to break the story. The presiding judge called for order as Blackwell's attorney frantically tried to control the damage. But Blackwell himself seemed to collapse inward, the weight of his exposed crimes crushing his practiced poise. The mask of the reformed father figure shattered completely, revealing the desperate face of a cornered predator. Sheriff Martinez stood at the back of the courtroom, deputies at her side. The evidence was more than enough for arrest warrants. They wouldn't wait for Blackwell to flee or destroy more evidence. As the sheriff moved forward, Blackwell suddenly shot to his feet. "You don't understand," he snarled, all pretense of dignity gone. "Those women didn't deserve those children. I gave them to better families, people with money and connections. I did what was right." His unhinged outburst echoed through the stunned courtroom. In those few seconds of rage, he revealed his true nature more clearly than any evidence could have shown. The deputies moved in, reading him his rights as they led him away in handcuffs. The powerful judge who terrorized so many families was revealed at last as exactly what he was: a corrupt predator who'd built his career destroying lives. Garrett watched them lead Blackwell away, feeling not triumph but a deep sadness for all the families who'd suffered under his influence. The real work of healing those wounds was just beginning. The courthouse erupted into chaos as deputies led Blackwell away in handcuffs. Garrett kept his eyes fixed on Callie and Chloe, who sat huddled together in the front row with a social worker. Something about the sudden movement near the courtroom doors caught his attention. A flash of dark clothing, hands moving too purposefully beneath jackets. 3 men burst through the doors, shoving aside bailiffs and spectators. Garrett's combat instincts screamed danger before his conscious mind could process the threat. He vaulted over the defense table as the first attacker drew a concealed weapon. "Get down," Garrett bellowed, already sprinting toward the girls. The social worker froze in panic, but the twins reacted instantly to his voice, dropping to the floor as he'd taught them during their visits to the ranch. Screams filled the courtroom as people scrambled for cover. The first gunshot cracked against the wooden bench where the girls had been sitting seconds before. Garrett scooped up both children, one under each arm, and charged toward the side exit. A bullet whizzed past his ear, close enough that he felt the displacement of air. "Hold on tight." he ordered the twins, who clung to him with trembling arms. He burst through the emergency exit into a narrow hallway, the sound of pursuing footsteps echoing behind them. The courthouse's layout flashed through his mind. He'd memorized it during trial preparation, a habit from his military days that was now saving their lives. Main exits would be watched. They needed an alternate route. Garrett shouldered through another door into the building's older wing, where renovations were underway. Construction materials and scaffolding created a maze of obstacles. He set the girls down behind a stack of drywall. "Remember our hide-and-seek game at the ranch?" he whispered, trying to keep his voice steady for their sake. Callie and Chloe nodded, their identical faces pale, but determined. Same rules. Stay quiet, stay together, do exactly what I say. Footsteps approached from multiple directions. They were being herded. Garrett led the girls through the construction zone, using the cover of plastic sheeting and building materials to mask their movements. His mind raced through tactical options, evaluating and discarding them based on the children's safety. A shadow moved ahead. Garrett pulled the twins behind a support column just as one of Blackwell's men rounded the corner, weapon raised. In the confined space, Garrett couldn't risk a firefight with the girls so close. He waited until the man passed, then struck, a precise chokehold that rendered the attacker unconscious in seconds. But the brief delay cost them. More footsteps approached from behind. Garrett urged the girls toward a window that opened onto the courthouse's rear parking area. 2 stories up, normally an impossible escape route with children, but the construction scaffolding provided a potential path down. "Trust me?" he asked the twins. They squeezed his hands in response. Garrett helped them onto the scaffolding, positioning himself to shield their smaller bodies from view. They began a careful descent, metal creaking beneath their weight. Halfway down, a shout from above announced their discovery. Bullets sparked against the metal framework. Garrett pulled Callie and Chloe closer to the building's wall, using his body as cover while they climbed. His shoulders burned from absorbed impacts, his tactical vest stopping rounds, but each hit feeling like a sledgehammer blow. They reached the ground as police sirens wailed in the distance, but the parking lot offered little cover, and more of Blackwell's men emerged from a waiting van. Garrett spotted a delivery truck idling nearby, its driver frozen in shock at the unfolding violence. "Run for the truck," he ordered the girls. "Don't stop for anything." Garrett engaged the nearest attacker, deflecting his weapon and driving an elbow into his throat. The next man rushed him with a knife. Training took over. Block, strike, disarm. Each movement calculated to keep the attackers focused on him instead of the fleeing children. A bullet grazed his arm. Garrett rolled behind a parked car, drawing fire away from the twins' position. Through the chaos, he glimpsed them reaching the delivery truck, scrambling into its open cargo area. 2 more of Blackwell's men fell to precise strikes before Garrett could break free and sprint for the truck. Callie and Chloe reached down to help pull him aboard just as the vehicle lurched into motion, its terrified driver finally reacting to the gunfire by stomping the accelerator. Bullets peppered the truck's sides as they roared out of the parking lot. Garrett pulled the girls close, checking them for injuries while scanning for pursuit. His tactical mind cataloged options. They needed to switch vehicles, find secure shelter, contact Wade and the sheriff for backup. But for now, he simply held Callie and Chloe as they clung to him, their small bodies trembling against his chest. "I've got you," he whispered. "You're safe. I won't let anything happen to you." More vehicles appeared in the truck's mirrors, the chase far from over. Garrett's jaw tightened as he prepared for what was coming. These men had threatened his family, the family Rebecca had entrusted to him. They were about to learn exactly why Navy SEALs were considered the world's most dangerous protectors. The courthouse chaos settled into an eerie quiet as police led away Blackwell's men in handcuffs. Garrett held Callie and Chloe close, their small bodies trembling against his chest. The twins hadn't let go of him since the chase ended, their fingers clutching his shirt as if afraid he might disappear. "You're safe now," he whispered, his voice hoarse from exertion. I've got you." A police officer approached with urgent news. Priscilla had taken a turn for the worse during the chaos. Without hesitation, Garrett rushed the girls to the hospital, his heart heavy with the knowledge of what was coming. The sterile hospital corridor seemed endless as they made their way to Priscilla's room. The twins grew quiet, sensing the gravity in the air. Inside, Priscilla lay propped up on pillows, her face gaunt but peaceful. Her eyes lit up at the sight of her daughters. "My beautiful girls," she whispered as Callie and Chloe carefully climbed onto her bed. "Come here." Garrett stood back, watching the intimate family moment unfold. Priscilla stroked their dark curls, so like her own, and pressed gentle kisses to their foreheads. Her movements were weak, but her love filled the room with unmistakable strength. "Garrett," she called softly, "please come closer." He approached the bed, his throat tight with emotion. Priscilla reached for his hand with trembling fingers. "Rebecca knew," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "She knew what kind of man you are. That's why she never told you about us. Not because she didn't trust you, but because she was protecting you until the right time." Tears slipped down her hollow cheeks. She was preparing you to be their father. Garrett's vision blurred as the truth of those words sank in. All those times Rebecca had talked about having children, all her gentle questions about adoption. She had been laying the groundwork, waiting for the perfect moment to bring her family together. "Will you raise them as your own?" Priscilla asked, her grip tightening slightly. "Will you give them the home Rebecca dreamed of for them?" "I will," Garrett promised without hesitation. "I'll protect them with my life. They'll never want for love or safety again." Relief washed over Priscilla's face. She turned to her daughters who were watching with wide, tear-filled eyes. "Remember how I told you about angels?" she asked them. "How they watch over us?" The girls nodded, sniffling. "Rebecca was your first angel," Priscilla continued, "and now Garrett will be your second. He'll take care of you just like she did." Her breathing grew labored, but she pressed on. "Promise me you'll be good for him. Promise me you'll stay together and love each other." "We promise, Mama," the twins said in unison, their voices small but certain. Priscilla's smile was radiant despite her weakness. "I love you so much," she whispered. So much." She held on long enough to see her daughters fall asleep curled up beside her, their faces peaceful in slumber. As the evening light faded, Priscilla looked at Garrett one last time. "Thank you," she breathed, "for fighting for them, for understanding Rebecca's heart." Then, surrounded by the family she loved, Priscilla slipped away quietly, a smile still gracing her lips. The following weeks passed in a blur of paperwork and adjustments. The adoption process, expedited by the extraordinary circumstances and Blackwell's crimes, moved swiftly. Garrett transformed the ranch into a home filled with children's laughter. Converting Rebecca's art studio into a bedroom decorated with butterflies and stars, just as the girls remembered from their visits with their aunt. On the day the adoption became final, Garrett took Callie and Chloe to Rebecca's grave. They placed fresh flowers beside the headstone, and for the first time, the visit wasn't marked by tears of grief, but by smiles of gratitude. "Your angel mama knew exactly what she was doing," Garrett told the girls, kneeling between them. "She brought us together even when she couldn't be here herself." Callie leaned against his shoulder. "Do you think she can see us?" "I know she can," Garrett replied, wrapping an arm around each of them, "and I know she's smiling." Looking at his daughters, his family, Garrett finally understood. Rebecca's greatest gift hadn't been their years together, precious as they were. It was this, the chance to heal his broken heart by opening it to love again, through the two little girls who needed him as much as he needed them. If this one resonated with you, stick around. I've got another story waiting for you tomorrow, and who knows, it might be just what you needed to hear.